The scent of pine resin and wet earth clung to everything in the valley, to the wooden beams of the great hall, to the fur-lined cloaks draped over broad shoulders, to my own skin as I pressed myself against the cold stone wall. Outside, rain drummed against the shutters with the rhythm of a heartbeat, steady and relentless, while inside, the gathering roared with voices that seemed to shake the very foundations of the pack house. I shouldn't have been here. The thought circled through my mind like a trapped bird, frantic and useless. My fingers found the small leather pouch hanging from my neck, a gift from my grandmother before she passed, filled with dried lavender and a single smooth river stone. When the world feels too loud, child, hold this and remember, the quietest waters run the deepest. Her words had been a comfort once. Now they felt like a cruel joke. What good was depth when no one could see it? What good was silence when it made you invisible? Around me, wolves celebrated the season's first successful hunt. Pack members moved through the hall with the easy confidence of those who belonged, their laughter bright and sharp as broken glass. The females wore their finest, leather bodices embroidered with pack symbols, hair braided with colored threads that marked their family lines. The males postured and prowled, already drunk on mead and the promise of winter choosing ceremonies to come. And then there was me. I had no family line to speak of. My hair, pale as winter wheat, hung loose and unadorned down my back. Too light, too different from the dark-haired wolves that filled this northern pack. My eyes, clouded and dim since birth, saw only shapes and shadows. The world rendered in soft gradients of light and dark. I navigated by sound and scent, by the feel of air currents against my skin, by the worn paths my feet had memorized over 23 years of careful living. The pack called me Ashling, a name that meant dream or vision. Though I suspected the irony wasn't lost on anyone. What vision could a blind Omega possibly have? I was useful for mending clothes and preparing herbs, for tasks that required patience rather than strength, for filling a space at the edge of things where I wouldn't get in the way. A burst of laughter erupted near the high table, and I turned my head toward the sound, trying to map the room through the chaos of noise. The Alpha King had arrived 3 days ago with his inner circle, a diplomatic visit, they said, though everyone knew it was more than that. Our pack needed his alliance. Raiders from the eastern territories had grown bold, and we were too small, too isolated to stand alone. I hadn't seen him, of course, but I'd felt him. The air had changed when he entered our lands, charged with something ancient and powerful, something that made my skin prickle and my wolf, quiet and small as she was, press close to the surface in recognition. They said he was a widower, that his mate had died in childbirth along with their child. They said he was cold now, carved from ice and duty, that he ruled with an iron hand and suffered no weakness in his ranks. They said many things, but I'd learned long ago that what people said and what was true were often different beasts entirely. A hand touched my shoulder, and I flinched before recognizing the scent. Rosemary and wood smoke. Mara, one of the few pack members who didn't treat me like a ghost. "You're shaking," she murmured, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "You should go back to your cottage. This crowd isn't for you." She meant it kindly, I knew. But kindness could cut just as deep as cruelty when it reminded you of everything you weren't. "I'm fine," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "I need to wait until the high table finishes. I promised to help clear the hall went silent. It happened so suddenly that the absence of sound felt like a physical blow. The laughter died. The music stopped. Even the fire seemed to quiet its crackling, as if the flames themselves had learned to hold their breath. I felt the shift in the air before I heard the footsteps, measured, purposeful, moving through the crowd like a blade through silk. Power radiated from the approaching figure in waves, and my wolf whimpered softly, torn between the urge to submit and something else, something I couldn't name. The Alpha King was moving through the hall, and he was coming toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pressed harder against the wall, wishing I could melt into the stone, become part of the shadows I lived in. Around me, I felt the pack members step back, creating a path, and the scent of fear, sharp and bitter, threaded through the air. Not fear of violence, necessarily, but fear of judgment, of being found wanting under that ancient, terrible gaze. The footsteps stopped 3 paces away. I could feel him now, a presence that seemed to take up all the air in the room, that made my skin feel too tight and my breathing too loud. He was tall. I could tell by the way the air moved above me. And he carried the scent of winter storms and old forests, of things that had endured beyond memory. "You," he said. His voice was deep, roughened by years of command, but there was something underneath it, something that made me think of locked rooms and buried grief. The single word hung in the air between us, heavy with meanings I couldn't decipher. I didn't know what to do. Should I bow? Speak? Run? My grandmother's voice whispered through my memory. "When facing the storm, child, plant your feet and breathe." So I did. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and met what I imagined was his gaze with my own sightless one. "Yes?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, though my fingers still clutched the leather pouch at my throat like a lifeline. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every eye in the hall upon us, could sense the confusion and speculation crackling through the crowd like electricity before a lightning strike. Then, from somewhere behind the Alpha King, I heard it. A small sound, barely more than a whimper. A child's cry, thin and frightened, cutting through the tension like a silver thread. The Alpha King's presence shifted, and I heard him turn, heard the rustle of fabric and the soft pad of small feet against stone. The child was running. Toward him, I thought. But then the trajectory changed. The footsteps grew closer to me. Faster, more desperate. Something small and solid collided with my legs. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall with one hand, while the other instinctively reached down to steady whatever had crashed into me. My fingers found soft hair, a small head, a body trembling with either fear or cold or both. The child. It had to be a child, no more than 3 or 4 years old, pressed against my skirts and wrapped tiny arms around my knees with a grip that spoke of drowning swimmers clutching driftwood. "Shh," I breathed, my omega instincts rising before thought could intervene. "Shh, little one. You're safe." The trembling didn't stop, but I felt the child's breathing begin to slow, matching the rhythm of my own. I crouched down, careful to keep one hand on the wall for balance, and reached out to gently touch the small face pressed against my dress. Tears. I felt them on my fingertips, warm and wet. Without thinking, I pulled the child closer, wrapping my arms around the small body and beginning to rock, a motion as old as time, as natural as breathing. The hall remained silent, but now the quality of that silence had changed. It felt shocked somehow, confused, even frightened. "Isla," the Alpha King said, and his voice carried a note I hadn't heard before, something raw and almost broken. "Come here. Now." The child in my arms didn't move. If anything, she pressed closer, her small fingers tangling in the fabric of my dress. I should let go. I knew that with every logical part of my brain. This was clearly his child, his business, his mama. The word was so soft I almost missed it, barely more than a breath against my collarbone. But in the absolute silence of the great hall, it carried like a shout. The small body in my arms shifted, and then the word came again, stronger this time, clear and heartbreaking in its certainty. "Mama." My world tilted. The child, Isla, had spoken, and she had called me something impossible. Something that made my heart crack open and bleed even as my arms tightened protectively around her. I felt the Alpha King move closer, felt the air grow colder with his approach, and for the first time in my careful, quiet life, I didn't step back. I stayed exactly where I was, sheltering this broken little girl who had, for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, chosen me in her moment of terror. When I finally lifted my face toward where I sensed the Alpha King standing, I couldn't see his expression, couldn't read whatever emotions might be crossing those features everyone spoke of with equal parts fear and reverence, but I felt his shock, like a physical thing, rolling off him in waves, and beneath it, hidden like a knife beneath silk, I felt something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog so thick I could taste it, metallic and cold, settling into my lungs with each breath. I hadn't slept. How could I, when the memory of that small voice kept echoing through my mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing? Mama. Such a simple word, yet it had shattered something fundamental in the order of things, and I didn't know if the pieces could ever be put back together the same way. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the cottage I'd occupied since my grandmother's death, my fingers tracing the worn grooves in the wooden floor that I'd memorized years ago. Outside, I could hear the pack beginning to stir, the clang of the breakfast bell, footsteps crunching through frost-stiff grass, voices raised in morning greetings that didn't include me. They never did. But today, those voices carried a different quality. Sharper, more urgent. I caught fragments of conversation through my poorly sealed windows. Can't believe she touched the Alpha King's pup. And hasn't spoken in 3 years, they say. And blind Omega of all people. My hands trembled as I braided my hair, muscle memory guiding fingers I couldn't trust with anything more complex. The leather pouch rested against my chest, and I pressed it there, seeking comfort. The quietest waters run the deepest. But what happened when those waters were forced to the surface? When the invisible became suddenly, terrifyingly visible? A knock at my door made me freeze. Not the hesitant tap of Mara checking on me, or the brisk double rap of the head Omega assigning daily tasks. This was something else. Firm, authoritative. The knock of someone who expected the door to open whether I wanted it to or not. Ashling. A male voice. Rough as gravel. Alpha King's orders. You're to come with me. My heart climbed into my throat. For a wild moment, I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't here, that I'd somehow vanished into the fog like a dream. But I'd learned long ago that hiding only delayed the inevitable, never prevented it. I opened the door. The scent hit me first, leather and steel and something acrid, like burnt wood. A warrior's scent. I'm to escort you to the king's chambers, the voice said, and I recognized it now. Garrett, one of the Alpha King's personal guards. I'd heard him at the feast, his voice cutting through the crowd with commands and certainty. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. A pause. That's not my place to say. Mine is to bring you. Now. There was no room for argument in that tone. I reached for my cloak, threadbare but clean, and wrapped it around my shoulders, then stepped out into the morning cold. Garrett's hand found my elbow, not rough, but not gentle either. The touch of someone fulfilling a duty rather than offering help. He led me through paths I only half knew, away from the main pack house, and toward the guest quarters where visiting dignitaries stayed. The buildings here were older, grander, built in a time when our pack had been something more than a struggling northern outpost. My feet found smooth stone instead of packed earth, and the air smelled of beeswax candles and expensive oils. We stopped before a door that radiated warmth. I could feel it even through the wood, hear the crackle of a well-fed fire inside. Garrett knocked once. The Omega, my lord. Enter. That voice. Deep and cold and carrying the weight of centuries, even though I knew the Alpha King couldn't be more than 35. The door opened, and Garrett's hand left my elbow. I stood at the threshold, uncertain, until I heard, "Come in. Close the door behind you." I stepped inside, and the warmth enveloped me immediately, such a contrast to my own cottage that I nearly gasped. The door clicked shut, and I was alone with him, alone with the Alpha King. "Sit," he said, and I heard the scrape of a chair being pulled out. There, the chair by the fire. I moved carefully, counting steps, extending my hand until my fingers found the chair's back. Solid oak, carved with symbols I couldn't see but could feel beneath my fingertips. Wolves running, trees growing, the eternal cycle rendered in wood. I sat, perching on the edge like a bird ready to flee. Silence settled between us, broken only by the fire's voice and the distant sounds of the pack outside. I waited, hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing even. "She hasn't spoken in 3 years," he said finally. Since her mother died. Since the day I carried 2 bodies from that birthing room instead of celebrating one life. The rawness in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the cold, carved-from-ice ruler they'd described. This was something else. Something human and hurting beneath the crown. The healers said it was trauma, he continued. That some children retreat into silence when the world becomes too painful. They said she would speak when she was ready. That I shouldn't force it. A bitter laugh. 3 years. 3 years of silence, and then she runs to a stranger and says the one word I've been desperate to hear. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. The quietest waters run the deepest. Why you? The question wasn't accusatory, just bewildered. Of all the people in that hall, strong warriors, respected females, her own nurses who've cared for her since birth, why would she run to you? The words stung, even though I knew he didn't mean them cruelly. But they voiced the question I'd been asking myself all night, turning it over and over like a stone in a river. I don't know, I admitted. I can't even see her face. I don't know what she looks like, what color her eyes are, if she has your features or her mother's. My voice cracked slightly, but I felt her fear. I felt how desperately she needed someone to hold her without expectation, without judgment. Sometimes, I hesitated, then continued. Sometimes being invisible makes you the only one who can truly see. Another silence, but this one felt different, thoughtful, rather than empty. The pack says you're weak, he said. That your blindness makes you a burden. That you contribute little beyond basic tasks any Omega could perform. Each word landed like a stone, building a wall I'd spent years trying to climb over. Yes, I said simply. They say that. Are they right? I lifted my chin, even though I couldn't meet his eyes. I navigate a world I cannot see. I survive in a pack that wishes I wouldn't. I find purpose in spaces others consider worthless. If that's weakness, my lord, then yes. I'm weak. A sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something darker. You have courage, at least. Most wouldn't speak to me that way. Forgive me, I started, but he cut me off. Don't. I've had enough of people telling me what they think I want to hear. Footsteps crossed the room, and I sensed him moving to the window. Isla hasn't eaten properly in 2 days. She won't let her nurses touch her. She fights sleep, fights everything. And when she finally exhausts herself, she wakes screaming from nightmares she can't describe. My heart clenched. She's grieving. For 3 years? Grief doesn't follow a timeline, my lord. Especially for a child who lost her mother before she could even understand what mother meant. I thought of my own grandmother, of the hole her death had left. Maybe she wasn't ready to accept it before. Maybe the pain was too big, so she made herself small and silent to survive it. And now? Now something changed. Something about last night, about that moment, opened a door. I touched the pouch at my throat. My grandmother used to say that healing begins when we finally name the wound, Mama, he said softly. She named it. Yes. More silence. Then, I need her to speak again. I need to know what she needs, what she's thinking, if she's... He trailed off, and I heard the fear underneath, the terror of a father who couldn't reach his child, couldn't protect her from the demons in her own mind. I don't know if I can help, I said honestly. I'm not a healer. I'm not trained in matters of the mind. I'm just, you're the one she called for. His voice hardened with decision. Therefore, you're the one she'll have. My breath caught. My lord? Starting today, you'll join Isla's household. You'll spend time with her, help care for her, be present in whatever capacity she needs. If you can reach her again, if you can help her speak, help her heal. He paused. Then you'll have my gratitude and my protection, for whatever that's worth. And the offer stunned me. To be pulled from my invisible existence at the pack's margins. To be given purpose and protection by the most powerful wolf in the realm. It should have felt like a gift, but I heard what he hadn't said. If you fail, if you can't reach her, you'll be just another disappointment. I'll try, I whispered. I can't promise anything, but I'll try. That's all I ask. Footsteps approached again, and then I felt something being pressed into my hand. A small carved wolf, smooth with age and handling. This was hers, her mother's. Isla carried it everywhere until... His voice roughened. Until she stopped carrying anything at all. Maybe you can convince her to hold it again. I closed my fingers around the carving, feeling the love worn into every curve. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met her in daylight, when the nightmares are clearer and the anger runs hot. He moved to the door, opened it. Garrett will show you to her rooms. She wakes in an hour. Try not to let her throw anything at you. She has excellent aim. I stood, clutching the carved wolf, my mind reeling. As I moved toward the door, his voice stopped me one last time. Aisling. I turned back toward where I sensed him standing. If you hurt her, if you give her hope and then abandon her like everyone else has. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I don't care how powerless you think you are. I'll make sure you regret it. The threat should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something unexpected bloom in my chest. Respect. This wasn't a cold king. This was a father who would burn the world to protect his child. Understood, my lord, I said. But know this. I've spent my entire life being abandoned and overlooked. I would never choose to make another soul feel that way. Especially not a child. I left before he could respond, following Garrett's footsteps through corridors that smelled of history and power, toward a future I couldn't see but could feel approaching like a storm. In my pocket, the carved wolf seemed to pulse with warmth, as if it too sensed that something irrevocable had begun. Isla's room smelled of lavender and sadness, an odd combination that told me someone had tried very hard to make the space cheerful, while the child within it remained shrouded in grief. I stood just inside the doorway, my fingers trailing along the wall as I mapped the space through sound and scent. Thick rugs muffled footsteps, heavy curtains blocked drafts. Somewhere to my left, a music box played a tinkling melody that felt almost aggressive in its manufactured joy. She's by the window, a female voice said. Clipped, professional, exhausted. One of the nurses, I assumed. Hasn't moved since dawn, won't eat, won't acknowledge us. The Alpha King said you were too. She trailed off, uncertainty bleeding through her words. Well, he said you were to try. The doubt in her voice was clear. What could a blind Omega possibly accomplish that trained caregivers couldn't? Thank you, I said quietly. You can leave us if you'd like. I'll call if I need anything. A pause, then retreating footsteps and the soft click of a door. Alone with Isla, I could hear her now, the whisper-soft sound of her breathing, the rustle of fabric as she shifted slightly. She was small, coiled tight like a spring, radiating a tension that made my own shoulders ache in sympathy. I didn't approach immediately. Instead, I moved to what I sensed was a chair near the center of the room, and sat down, letting my presence settle without demanding anything. The music box continued its relentless cheer, grating against my nerves. That's rather loud, isn't it? I said conversationally, speaking to the room as much as to Isla. My grandmother had a music box once. Beautiful thing, supposedly, silver and painted with roses, but the sound always gave me headaches. I tilted my head. Would you mind if I turned it off? Silence. But a different quality to it now, listening silence rather than empty absence. I stood and followed the sound, hands extended until my fingers found the smooth wooden surface of a table, then the metal contours of the music box. I fumbled with it for a moment before finding the clasp. The music died, and the relief was immediate. Much better, I murmured, returning to my chair. Now I can actually hear myself think. More silence. I pulled the carved wolf from my pocket and turned it over in my hands, letting my fingers explore its shape. A moment later, I heard the softest intake of breath from the window. Recognition, perhaps, or longing. Your father gave this to me, I said, still not looking directly at where Isla sat. He said it was your mother's, that you used to carry it everywhere. I held it out, extending my arm in her general direction. I think it misses you. Nothing. But I could feel attention now, sharp and focused, boring into me from across the room. I waited, arm outstretched, patient as stone. My grandmother's voice whispered through memory. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply holding space for another's pain. A minute passed. 2. My arm began to ache, but I didn't lower it. Then, so faint I almost missed it, the whisper of small feet against carpet. A tiny hand touched mine, hesitant as a bird landing on an unfamiliar branch. I felt small fingers close around the carved wolf, and then the touch was gone, retreating back to the window. I lowered my arm and smiled. Thank you for taking it. I think it was lonely in my pocket. A sound that might have been a breath or might have been something closer to a laugh. Impossible to tell. I'm Aisling, I continued, folding my hands in my lap. Though you probably already know that. Everyone seems to know everyone's business around here. I paused. Your father asked me to spend time with you. Not because he thinks you need fixing, you're not broken no matter what anyone says, but because sometimes it helps to have someone nearby who understands what it's like to be different. The listening silence continued, neither welcoming nor rejecting. I can't see you, I said, deciding on honesty. I was born with eyes that don't work the way most people's do, so I navigate by other things. Sound, scent, touch, the way air moves through a room. It makes me slow sometimes, clumsy. The pack thinks it makes me useless. I touched the leather pouch at my throat. But my grandmother taught me that there are different ways of seeing, that sometimes the most important things are invisible to eyes anyway. A rustle of fabric. Was she turning toward me? I'll tell you a secret, I continued, lowering my voice conspiratorially. Last night, when you ran to me in the Great Hall, I was terrified. All those people staring, your father standing there like winter itself, and I couldn't see any of it. I only felt you, small and scared and needing someone to hold the fear with you. My throat tightened. And when you called me, when you said that word, it broke my heart and mended it at the same time. Footsteps now, deliberate, coming closer. I held perfectly still, barely breathing, as Isla approached. I felt her stop directly in front of me, close enough that I could sense her small body's warmth. Then, with a gentleness that made tears prick at my sightless eyes, she reached out and touched my face. Her fingers traced my features with the methodical curiosity of a child trying to understand, across my forehead, down my nose, along my cheeks. When she reached my eyes, she paused, and I felt her small thumb brush across my closed lids with infinite care. They don't work, I whispered. But they don't hurt. They're just different. Her hand moved to my hair, and I heard a soft sound, surprise perhaps. My pale blonde hair was unusual here, I knew. Foreign. Wrong, like moonlight, I said. That's what my grandmother called it, hair like moonlight on snow. I smiled. Yours is dark, isn't it? I can tell from the texture, soft as silk and dark as midnight. You must be beautiful. The hand in my hair stilled, and then I felt something that made my breath catch. Isla climbing into my lap. She moved with the determined clumsiness of a small child, all elbows and knees, until she'd arranged herself against my chest, her head tucked beneath my chin. The carved wolf pressed between us, hard and warm. My arms came up automatically, encircling her, and I began to rock, the same gentle motion from last night, as old as time and just as necessary. I lost someone too, I murmured into her hair. My grandmother. She raised me after my parents. After they couldn't anymore. She taught me everything. How to navigate in darkness, how to find beauty in small things, how to survive when the world says you shouldn't. My voice cracked. When she died, I didn't speak for a long time either. Not 3 years, but long enough, because words felt too small to hold all that hurt. Isla's small hand found mine, threading our fingers together. But eventually, I continued, I realized that silence was its own kind of cage. That by refusing to speak, I was making myself even smaller than the pack already thought I was. So I started with small words, simple things. Yes and no and thank you. And slowly the bigger words came back. I felt wetness against my collarbone, tears, silent and hot. You don't have to speak today, I said softly. or tomorrow, or even next week, but know that when you're ready, I'll listen. And I promise, little one, that whatever words you choose to share will be safe with me. We sat like that for a long time, rocking gently while the morning light I couldn't see warmed the room and the pack went about its business outside. Isla's breathing eventually evened out, her small body growing heavy with exhaustion or trust or both. A knock at the door, firm but quiet. "Enter," I called softly. The Alpha King's scent filled the room, winter storms and old forests. But he didn't speak immediately. I felt him stop, felt the weight of his gaze on us. His daughter curled in my lap like she belonged there. Both of us wrapped in a peace that felt fragile as spun glass. "She's asleep," I whispered. "I see that." His voice was rough, barely controlled. She hasn't let anyone hold her like that since... I know." Footsteps approached, careful and measured. I felt him kneel beside the chair, bringing himself to our level. The heat of his presence enveloped us, and I caught something unexpected in his scent. Salt, tears. "Thank you," he breathed, and the words carried the weight of 3 years' desperate hope. "Don't thank me yet," I echoed his earlier words. "This is just the beginning. She has a long way to go, but it is a beginning." His hand touched Isla's hair, gentle as prayer. "That's more than we've had." We stayed like that, 3 broken people forming something that felt almost whole, until Isla stirred and whimpered. I hummed softly, a melody my grandmother used to sing, and felt her settle again. "What is that song?" the Alpha King asked. "An old lullaby. Very old. My grandmother said it came from the first Omegas, back when wolves still spoke to the moon." I continued humming, letting the melody wrap around us like a blanket. "It's about finding home in unexpected places." "Fitting," he murmured. When he finally stood to leave, his hand brushed my shoulder, brief, warm, carrying gratitude too big for words. Then he was gone, and I was alone with Isla again, this child who had chosen me for reasons neither of us fully understood. Outside, I heard the pack training, shouts and the clash of practice weapons. Inside, we remained cocooned in our pocket of peace, defying the world's expectations simply by existing together. The carved wolf pressed between us seemed to pulse with warmth, and for the first time since my grandmother's death, I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. Purpose. 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands, each day bleeding into the next, marked by small victories and frustrating setbacks. Isla still hadn't spoken again, but she'd begun to communicate in other ways. A tug on my skirt when she wanted attention. The carved wolf pressed into my palm when nightmares woke her, small hands arranging my fingers around wooden blocks in patterns I couldn't see but could feel, her way of showing me her world. The pack's attitude toward me had shifted, though not entirely in ways that felt comfortable. Some watched with cautious respect, seeing how the Alpha King's daughter clung to me like a lifeline. Others whispered with barely concealed resentment. Why her? Why the broken Omega? What makes her so special? I heard it all, felt it in the way conversations stopped when I entered rooms, in the deliberate distance others maintained. But the Alpha King, Declan, I'd learned his name, though I still couldn't bring myself to use it, had been true to his word. Protection came in the form of better quarters, enough food, and the unmistakable message that touching me meant answering to him. It was more safety than I'd ever known, and it terrified me almost as much as it comforted me. Today, Isla and I sat in the gardens, despite the late autumn chill. I'd bundled her in furs and settled us on a stone bench, worn smooth by centuries of use. The air smelled of dying leaves and approaching winter, and I could hear the distant sounds of the pack preparing for the season. Wood being chopped, supplies being stored, the constant activity of survival. "Tell me what you see," I said softly, my arm around Isla's small shoulders. "Paint it with words, even if they stay inside your head. Practice for when you're ready to let them out." She leaned against me, and I felt her hand come up to trace shapes in the air. Describing, I assumed, the garden she could see, and I couldn't. Her breathing changed with each gesture, growing more animated, almost excited. "Is it beautiful?" I asked. A squeeze of my hand. "Yes." "Are there birds?" Another squeeze. "What color are they?" I felt her pause, thinking. Then she took my hand and pressed it against the leather of my belt. "Brown." "Dark birds, then. Crows?" A squeeze. I smiled. My grandmother loved crows, said they were clever, that they remembered faces and held grudges. Rather like wolves when you think about it. A sound from Isla, not quite a giggle, but close. So close. Footsteps approached on the garden path. Multiple sets. I tensed automatically, tightening my hold on Isla as I tried to identify the newcomers by gait and scent. 2 males, 1 female. Pack members, but not ones I recognized well. "So this is where the miracle worker hides," a male voice said, dripping with false sweetness. "Teaching the mute pup to play in the dirt." I kept my voice level. "We're enjoying the fresh air. Can I help you with something?" "The Alpha King requested our presence at the noon meal," the female said. Sienna, I remembered now, one of the stronger pack females who'd been positioning herself as a potential mate choice. "We thought we'd collect you personally. Can't have you getting lost on the way, can we?" The condescension stung, but I'd learned long ago not to react. "That's kind of you. We'll head in shortly. Now, actually," the second male voice cut in. Ronan, a warrior who'd made his disdain for weakness very clear. "The Alpha King doesn't like to be kept waiting, even by his charity cases." Isla's hand found mine and gripped tight. I felt her fear spike, sharp and acrid, and my Omega instincts rose in response. Protect the young, shield the vulnerable, hold the line even when outmatched. "We'll come when we're ready," I said, allowing steel to enter my voice. "Isla needs a moment to transition. Rushing her would be counterproductive." "Counterproductive," Sienna laughed. "Listen to her, using big words like she's actually educated. Tell me, Omega, did someone teach you to read, or do you just memorize sounds and pretend to understand them?" Heat flushed my cheeks, but I held my ground. "My grandmother taught me many things, reading among them. Now if you'll excuse us..." A hand grabbed my arm, yanking me to my feet with enough force that I stumbled. Isla cried out, a wordless sound of distress, and I heard her scramble off the bench. "You don't dismiss us," Ronan growled, his grip tightening. "You're nothing. A broken toy the Alpha King's daughter latched onto because children don't know any better. The moment he realizes you're useless, you'll be back in your hovel where you belong. Let go of me." My voice shook, but I kept it firm. "Or what?" He leaned closer, his breath hot against my face. "You'll what? You can't even see to defend yourself. You're prey pretending to be pack, and everyone knows it." Something shifted in the air, a change so sudden and violent it felt like lightning about to strike. The hand on my arm released immediately, and I heard Ronan stumble backward with a choked sound. "Explain." One word, cold as winter death, from a voice I'd come to recognize in my bones. Declan. The Alpha King had arrived, and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees with him. "My lord, we were just..." Ronan's confident cruelty had evaporated into stammering fear. "You were just putting your hands on someone under my explicit protection, in front of my daughter, after I made it abundantly clear what would happen to anyone who threatened them." Each word fell like an axe. "So I'll ask again, and this time I want the truth. Explain why I shouldn't have you removed from this pack entirely." Silence, thick with terror. I felt Isla press against my legs, trembling. I reached down automatically, running my fingers through her hair in comfort, even as my own heart hammered against my ribs. "They were escorting us to the noon meal, my lord," I said quietly. Perhaps more forcefully than necessary, but don't. Declan's voice shifted, now directed at me. "Don't make excuses for them. Don't diminish what happened because you think it makes life easier. I've had 3 weeks to watch the way this pack treats you, and my patience has run out." He moved closer, and I felt his hand, warm, solid, rest briefly on my shoulder, a gesture of reassurance but also of claim. Mine to protect, mine to defend. Ronan, you're removed from the guard, effective immediately. Sienna, you're reassigned to the Southern Border Patrol for the winter, and both of you will formally apologize to Aisling, on your knees, in front of the entire pack at tonight's meal. Refuse, and you're exiled. Choose. I heard them drop to their knees on the path, heard the gravel bite into flesh as they knelt. The apologies, when they came, were bitter and forced, but they came nonetheless. Now leave, Declan said, and spread the word. Anyone who touches Aisling or Isla answers to me personally. I won't be as generous with the next offense. Footsteps retreated rapidly, practically running. The third pack member, I'd almost forgotten about him, lingered a moment longer. My lord, I didn't participate. You stood by and watched. That's participation enough. Go. Then we were alone, me, Isla, and the Alpha King in the dying garden, surrounded by the ghosts of words that couldn't be taken back. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice losing some of its frost. No. Shaken but not hurt. Isla. I felt her nod against my leg, still clinging tight. A long exhale from Declan, heavy with frustration. This pack is poisoned by old thinking. Strength measured only in teeth and claws, weakness seen as contagion. I've tried to change it, but tradition runs deep. You don't have to fight my battles, I said softly. Yes, I do. The intensity in his voice made me shiver. You think I don't see it? The way you make yourself small, apologize for existing, take responsibility for others' cruelty? You've been trained to accept scraps and call it kindness. His hand found my chin, tilting my face upward. But you're under my protection now, and that means something. It has to mean something, or what's the point of power? I couldn't see his face, couldn't read his expression, but I felt something in that touch. Something beyond duty or gratitude, something that made my breath catch, and my wolf stir with cautious, confused recognition. Thank you, I whispered. His thumb brushed across my cheek, gentle as prayer. Come. Noon meal can wait. I think we all need a moment to breathe. He guided us back toward the pack house, his hand steady at my elbow. Isla walked between us, one hand clutching mine, the other reaching up to grip her father's cloak. We must have looked strange, the powerful Alpha King, the blind Omega, and the silent child, moving through the autumn garden like we belonged together, like we were family. The thought terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me, because I'd learned long ago that hope was the most dangerous thing you could carry in a world designed to crush it. But as Declan's warmth surrounded us, and Isla's small hand squeezed mine with trust I didn't deserve, I felt that hope anyway. Stubborn and foolish and impossibly bright. And I didn't push it away. Winter arrived with teeth bared and claws extended, transforming the valley into something crystalline and merciless. The pack house groaned under the weight of accumulated snow, and ice formed patterns on windows that I could trace with my fingers, fractals of cold geometry that Isla would describe to me in gestures and pressed hands, painting pictures with touch instead of words. 6 weeks had passed since that day in the garden. 6 weeks of slow, painstaking progress with Isla. Moments where I thought she might speak again, followed by long stretches of silence that felt like setbacks but weren't. She was healing, I realized, in the way broken bones heal. Slowly, with pain, requiring patience and care, and the understanding that some things couldn't be rushed. And somewhere in those 6 weeks, something else had begun to heal too. Declan had started joining us for evening meals, not in the great hall with the pack, but in the smaller chambers he'd assigned to me and Isla. Private meals where we ate simply and talked about nothing important, where Isla would arrange wooden blocks between us and Declan would describe his day in ways that made even administrative tedium sound almost interesting. He'd told me about his mate, Serena, on one of those evenings, his voice rough with old grief. How she'd been chosen for political alliance rather than love, but how they'd built something genuine anyway. How she'd died trying to give him an heir, her body not strong enough to survive the birth, even as Isla fought her way into the world. How he'd held 2 souls that day, one arriving, one departing, and felt something fundamental break inside him. I failed her, he'd said quietly, his hand wrapped around a cup of mulled wine. I was supposed to protect her, and instead You didn't fail, I'd interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. Birth is dangerous. Bodies are fragile. Sometimes there's no one to blame. Just terrible luck and worse timing. I'd reached across the table, found his hand, squeezed it. You gave Isla life. Serena gave Isla life. That's not failure. That's sacrifice and love woven together. He'd turned his hand over, threading our fingers together, and we'd sat like that while Isla played with her blocks. Two adults holding shared grief while a child built towers that would inevitably fall. But tonight felt different. There was electricity in the air, tension that had nothing to do with weather, and everything to do with the choice that had been building for weeks. The Pack's Winter Council was convening. Decisions would be made about spring alliances, about border disputes with neighboring territories, about the future of leadership succession. And I'd learned through whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to overhear, about whether the Alpha King would finally choose a new mate. You should be there, I told Declan as we prepared Isla for bed. She was already drowsy, her small body heavy with the pleasant exhaustion of a day spent playing in the snow. This is important Pack business, and you're not Pack business? He lifted Isla gently, carrying her to the small bed in the adjacent room. I followed, navigating by memory and the sound of his footsteps. I struggled for words. I'm temporary. A solution to a specific problem. Once Isla speaks again, once she's fully healed, I'll return to my cottage and you'll what? He settled Isla beneath blankets, then turned to face me. I felt his presence like heat from a forge. Go back to being invisible? Accept scraps from a pack that never valued you? Pretend these last 6 weeks didn't happen? That's how the world works, I said, hating how defeated I sounded. People like me don't get fairy tale endings. People like you. His hand found my face, cupping my cheek with a gentleness that made tears prick at my eyes. You mean people who sacrifice their own comfort to hold a grieving child? People who face down Pack warriors without flinching? People who teach broken kings how to hope again? Declan! His name slipped out before I could stop it, intimate and dangerous. Say it again, he breathed. We can't. Say it. Declan. Barely a whisper, but it felt like surrender. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt him trembling. This powerful, ancient king, shaking like a leaf. The council wants me to choose Sienna. Strong bloodline, proven warrior, politically advantageous. She'd give me the heir they think I need, strengthen alliances, fulfill every expectation of what an alpha queen should be. Each word cut like glass. Then you should choose her. I don't want her. His hands frame my face now, holding me like something precious. I want the woman who sings old lullabies to my daughter. I want the woman who navigates darkness with more courage than most wolves show in full light. I want the woman who made me remember that strength comes in forms I'd forgotten to recognize. I'm blind, I choked out. Weak. I can't give you powerful heirs or political advantages. I can't even see your face. Then let me describe it to you. His thumb traced my cheekbone. I have a scar here. He guided my hand to his temple, from a border skirmish years ago. My eyes are gray, or so I'm told. Storm-colored. My hair is too long because I keep forgetting to cut it. He moved my hand to his jaw. I'm told I look severe, unapproachable. That children cry when I enter rooms. But not Isla, I murmured, my fingers exploring the landscape of his face. Strong bones, rough stubble, features carved by time and grief and responsibility. Not Isla, he agreed, because you taught her that appearances don't matter, that the heart beneath is what counts. His voice dropped lower. You've taught me that too. The Pack will never accept. The Pack will accept what I tell them to accept. I'm done letting fear and tradition dictate my choices. He pulled back slightly, though his hands remained on my shoulders. But I won't force this on you. If you want to return to your cottage, if you want distance from all this chaos, I'll give you that. I'll make sure you're provided for, protected, given the respect you've always deserved. Hope and terror warred in my chest. And if I don't want distance, then come to the council with me. Stand at my side. Let me announce to the entire Pack that I choose you. Not as a temporary solution, but as my mate. My queen. Isla's mother in truth. Not just in the words she spoke. The world tilted. You're serious? I've never been more serious about anything. His hands tightened on my shoulders. I love you, Aisling. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night when you held my daughter without fear. Maybe during one of our evening meals. Maybe in the 1,000 small moments between. But I love you, and I'm done pretending I don't. Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. I can't see you. I'll never see our children's faces, never watch them grow, never. You'll know them. The way you know Isla, through touch and voice and presence. The way you know me, better than anyone who's ever looked at my face. He wiped my tears with his thumbs. And if the pack can't understand that, if they can't see that you're worth 1,000 political alliances, then they don't deserve to be led by either of us. From the adjacent room, a sound made us both freeze. A small voice, sleep-rough but clear as bells. Mama should stay. We turned as one. Isla stood in the doorway, the carved wolf clutched to her chest, her dark hair tousled from the pillow. She looked between us with eyes that held 3 years' worth of silence finally breaking. Isla. Declan breathed. You spoke. Mama should stay, she repeated, more firmly this time. Papa loves Mama. I love Mama. We're family. She walked to us, small and brave, and took both our hands. Tell them. At the council. Tell everyone. I dropped to my knees, pulling her into my arms, sobbing openly now. Oh, little one. Are you sure? Are you really sure? Her small hands patted my back with the careful comfort of a child mimicking what she'd received. You stayed when everyone left. You stayed when it hurt. Now we stay with you. She pulled back, touching my wet face with wonder. Happy tears? Yes, I laughed through the tears. Very happy tears. Declan knelt beside us, wrapping his arms around us both. We stayed like that, 3 broken pieces forming something whole, while snow fell outside, and the pack waited in the great hall for decisions that would change everything. I'm afraid, I admitted into Declan's chest. So am I, he murmured. But we'll be afraid together. The great hall fell silent as we entered. I felt the weight of every eye, every judgment, every unspoken question. Declan's hand was firm at my back. Isla's small fingers gripped mine, and together we moved through the pack like a unit. Undeniable and unapologetic. The council sat at the high table. 6 elders whose voices carried weight even kings had to respect. I sensed their confusion, their disapproval, their calculation. What game was their alpha playing, bringing the blind Omega to sacred proceedings? Members of the pack, honored council, Declan's voice rang out, clear and commanding. I've gathered you to announce my decision regarding succession and the future of our bloodline. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt Sienna's presence somewhere to my left, radiating smug confidence. She thought she'd won. Many have suggested I take a new mate. Someone strong, politically connected, capable of providing heirs and cementing alliances. He paused, letting the expectation build. They're right that I need a mate, but they're wrong about what strength looks like. The murmurs grew louder, more confused. For 3 years, my daughter lived in silence. The finest healers, the strongest warriors, the most patient nurses, none could reach her. She was locked away, and I was powerless to help her. His hand tightened on my back. Then this woman, blind, powerless by pack standards, forgotten by those who should have valued her, did what no one else could. She held my daughter's grief. She stayed when staying was hard. She loved without expectation or agenda. My lord, one of the council members spoke up, Elder Torin, his voice cracked with age. Surely you're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting. I'm declaring. Steel entered Declan's voice. Aisling is my chosen mate. She will be your queen, Isla's mother, and the heart of this pack, whether you approve or not. Chaos erupted. Voices raised in protest, shock, disbelief. I felt the pressure of their judgment like a physical weight, crushing down on me from all sides. My hand found the leather pouch at my throat, seeking anchor. The quietest waters run the deepest. This is madness. Sienna's voice cut through the noise. She's blind, weak. She can't defend herself, can't lead, can't... She can love. Isla's small voice rang out, surprising everyone into silence. She can hold fear and make it small. She can see in the dark when Papa can't. The child moved forward, standing between me and the pack's judgment. You say Mama is weak, but she's the strongest person I know. Because she stayed. My heart shattered and reformed in the same breath. The child speaks truth, another council voice. Elder Mora, a female whose opinion carried weight among the pack women. We've witnessed the change. The pup who wouldn't speak now defends this Omega with words we thought lost forever. Perhaps there's wisdom here we're too stubborn to see. Or perhaps the child is confused, attached to the first person who showed her kindness. Torin argued. My lord, think carefully. A blind queen? What message does that send to our enemies? To potential allies? It sends the message, Declan said coldly, that we value heart over appearance, substance over show, and that anyone who underestimates us because of perceived weakness will learn that lesson the hard way. He moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. Aisling has survived in a pack that dismissed her, navigated a world designed for the sighted, and reached my daughter when no one else could. If that's not strength, then we've been measuring wrong all along. The treaty with the Eastern Pacts, someone shouted, will stand or fall on its own merits, not on who warms my bed, Declan snapped. And if they're fool enough to judge us on anything other than our actions and honor, then they're not allies worth having. Silence again, heavy with deliberation. Then Elder Mora spoke. I call for a vote, not on the Alpha King's choice, that is his alone to make, but on whether we accept this Omega as our queen. Those in favor of following our king's leadership, raise your voices. A pause. Then, tentatively, voices began. I. More joined. I. A chorus now, growing. I. Not everyone. I could feel pockets of resistance, silence that spoke louder than opposition, but enough. More than enough. It's done, Elder Mora declared. The pack accepts Aisling as Luna. May the bond prove strong and the leadership true. My knees buckled. Only Declan's arm kept me upright as relief and terror and joy crashed through me in equal measure. Isla pressed against my legs and I felt her small body shaking. With laughter or tears, I couldn't tell. There will be a formal bonding ceremony at the new moon, Declan announced. Until then, Aisling remains under my protection and carries my authority. Anyone who questions that answers to me personally. He turned to me, his voice dropping to something only I could hear. Breathe, love. You did it. We did it. I think I might be sick, I whispered. He laughed. Actual laughter, warm and surprised. Later. Right now, smile and pretend you're not terrified. So I did. I lifted my chin, squared my shoulders, and faced a pack I couldn't see with all the courage my grandmother had tried to teach me. The quietest waters run the deepest, but sometimes those waters had to rise to the surface and make themselves known. The bonding ceremony came and went in a blur of ritual and sensation, Declan's hand in mine, his vows spoken in the old tongue. The pack's recognition settling into my bones like truth. I wore flowers in my hair that Isla had woven, and a dress of silver blue that supposedly matched my eyes, though I had to take their word for it. But the moment I remembered most clearly came after, when the pack had dispersed, and we returned to chambers that were now officially ours, mine, Declan's, Isla's, home, in a way I'd never had before. Isla was tucked in bed, the carved wolf resting beside her pillow. She looked up at us with dark eyes that reflected firelight. Tell me a story, Mama? The word still made my breath catch. What kind of story? About the girl who couldn't see but found everything anyway. I smiled, settling beside her while Declan stood in the doorway, watching. Once upon a time, there was a girl born into darkness. Everyone said she was broken, that she'd never amount to anything, that she should hide away and be grateful for scraps. But she was brave, Isla prompted. But she was brave, I agreed. And one day, a little girl who'd lost her voice found her in the shadows. And the little girl said one word, just one, but it changed everything. "Mama," Isla whispered. "Mama," I repeated, tucking the blankets around her. And that one word became a bridge between past and future, between grief and joy, between three people who needed each other more than they knew. "And they lived happily ever after?" Isla asked, her eyes already drooping. I thought about the challenges ahead, pack politics, potential threats, the daily work of building something lasting from our broken pieces. I thought about the fact that I'd never see my children's faces, never watch sunrises with my own eyes, never stop navigating a world designed for the sighted. But I also thought about Declan's hand in mine, about Isla's trust, about belonging somewhere for the first time in my life. "They lived," I said softly, "happily and otherwise, through good days and hard ones. But they lived together, and that made all the difference." Isla smiled and drifted into sleep. I stood carefully, letting Declan guide me from the room. Once the door closed behind us, he pulled me into his arms, holding me like I might disappear if he loosened his grip. "Thank you," he murmured into my hair. "For what?" "For staying. For being brave enough to let us love you. For believing that broken things can still be beautiful." He pulled back, framing my face with his hands. "For making me remember that the best things in life are the ones we never see coming." I laughed, the sound watery with emotion. "I never see anything coming. Terrible joke. You love me anyway." "I do," he said seriously. "More than I thought I could love anything after Serena. Differently, but no less deeply. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back myself. How could I not love you?" I raised up on my toes, found his lips with mine, and kissed him with all the words I didn't have. Gratitude and love and promise and hope braided together. When we finally broke apart, I was trembling, and so was he. "Come to bed," he whispered. "Tomorrow we'll deal with pack business and politics and whatever chaos awaits. But tonight, let's just be us. Family." So we did. We climbed into the large bed that still smelled new, and Declan held me close while winter winds howled outside. I traced the features of his face in the darkness, memorizing him through touch, the scar at his temple, the rough stubble of his jaw, the smile that softened his severe features. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm still afraid," I admitted. "That I'll fail you, fail Isla, fail the pack. That one day you'll realize you made a mistake. Then we'll be afraid together," he said, echoing his earlier words. "And on the days you doubt, I'll remind you of everything you've already survived, everything you've already accomplished, and on the days I doubt, you'll do the same for me." His arms tightened. "That's what family does, what mates do. We hold each other's fear until it gets small enough to manage." I thought of Isla, her small voice saying Mama should stay. I thought of the pack's acceptance, grudging though some of it had been. I thought of my grandmother's leather pouch, still hanging from my neck, carrying lavender and river stones and lessons about quiet waters running deep. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, the world was bigger and stranger and more beautiful than I'd ever dared to imagine. That stories could have happy endings even when you couldn't see them coming. That love could bloom in the darkest places and transform everything it touched. "I love you," I whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Declan murmured back. "My queen, my mate, my Ashling." And held safe in his arms, surrounded by family I'd never expected to find, I finally let myself believe it. The quietest waters had risen to the surface at last, and they were deeper and stronger and more beautiful than anyone had ever imagined they could be.